Julian Harrow came home early from a Billionaire summit expecting champagne, a warm dinner, and Serena's polished smile. Instead, he found his black adoptive mother curled on a thin mattress beside paint cans in the garage, wearing a grey maid uniform, her blood pressure pills balanced on an overturned bucket. The guest suite he built for her was locked. Her suitcase was hidden behind snow tires. And when Julian asked who had done this, Marlene whispered, "Please don't make Serena angry. She already knows about the papers." Welcome to today's story. If you enjoy emotional drama and shocking twists, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more unforgettable stories. And before we begin, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. 3 months earlier, Julian still believed money had protected the woman who saved him. From the outside, his life looked almost impossible to damage. Julian Harrow was 46 years old, the founder of Harrow Meridian, a private software company in Bellevue, Washington. His name appeared in business magazines. His face appeared on conference stages. People called him self-made, visionary, disciplined. They liked that word most, disciplined, as if discipline alone explained how a man could build billions from nothing and still answer emails before sunrise. But Julian knew better. He had not built his life alone. There was a woman behind every version of him that survived, Marlene Brooks. She was 71 now, though Julian still sometimes forgot that until he saw her hands. They were darker at the knuckles, a little swollen, slower than they used to be when she buttoned her cardigan or reached for a mug. For most of her working life, Marlene had been a hospital aide, night shifts, double shifts, holiday shifts, the kind of work wealthy people praised in speeches and rarely noticed in hallways. She was not Julian's mother by blood, she became his mother by choice. That was how she always said it, softly and without drama. Choice mattered more than blood when choice stayed. After a blood pressure scare that had left her dizzy in a grocery store parking lot, Julian insisted she move into his estate near Lake Washington. He gave her the East Guest Suite because it caught the morning sun. He had it repainted in warm cream. He bought a new reading chair for the window. He stocked the bathroom with the lavender soap she liked. Then he told himself that was care. The room was beautiful. The room was expensive. The room made him feel less guilty every time he boarded another flight. His wife, Serena, had smiled when Marlene moved in. "Of course she should be here," Serena had said, standing in the foyer in a silk blouse the color of pearl. "She's family." Marlene had lowered her eyes at that word, not from shame but from gratitude. Julian remembered that. He remembered thinking he had chosen well, a wife with grace, a home with space, a mother safe at last. For a while everything looked that way. Serena sent him photographs when he traveled. Marlene sitting in the garden with tea. Marlene near the fireplace with a blanket over her knees. Marlene at the breakfast table with a plate in front of her. Always smiling, always neat, always framed in proof. Julian believed those photographs because he wanted to. He called from Zurich, Singapore, Austin, New York. Serena usually answered first. She would say Marlene was resting, or taking a bath, or watching one of her church programs. Sometimes Marlene came on the phone, but not for long. Her voice sounded careful. Julian told himself she was tired. People got tired at 71. That was normal. What was not normal was the silence he noticed when he returned early on a rainy Thursday evening. His driver had not been available, so Julian drove himself from the airport in a black electric SUV, still wearing the navy suit he had worn on stage that morning. The house glowed at the end of the long driveway, all glass and stone and soft golden light. It looked peaceful, too peaceful. No music came from the kitchen, no smell of cinnamon tea, no low hum of Marlene's old gospel playlist coming from the small speaker she loved to carry around. He entered through the side door with his suitcase in one hand. "Serena?" he called. No answer. He set the suitcase down, then he heard something from the garage. Not a crash, not a voice, a small cough. Julian frowned and walked toward the sound. The garage door was not fully closed. A thin line of yellow light cut across the hallway floor. He pushed it open. At first, his mind refused to understand what he was seeing. There were storage shelves against the wall, stacked paint cans, winter tires, a folded ladder, and beside them, on a thin mattress laid directly over a concrete floor, was Marlene. She was asleep on her side, wrapped in a worn brown blanket Julian did not recognize. Her grey maid uniform was buttoned wrong at the collar. One black shoe sat near her feet. The other was tucked beneath the mattress, as if she had been afraid someone might take it. Her pills sat on an overturned bucket. Her suitcase was half hidden behind snow tires. Julian stopped breathing. "Mom?" Marlene stirred, her eyes opened slowly. For 1 second she looked confused, then she saw him. The fear came before the joy. That was what broke him. Not the mattress, not the uniform, not the cold garage, the fear. Julian stepped toward her. "What happened? Why are you sleeping here?" Marlene pushed herself up too quickly and winced. "I'm fine, baby. I just needed a little quiet in the garage." She looked toward the door leading back into the mansion. Julian followed her eyes. The house suddenly felt different behind him. Larger, colder, full of rooms he had paid for but had not truly entered. He knelt beside her and touched the sleeve of the uniform. "Who gave you this?" Marlene pressed her lips together. "Mom." "Please, Julian," she whispered. "Don't make Serena angry." His chest tightened. "Serena?" Marlene's hand moved toward the blanket. Her fingers trembled. She looked smaller than he had ever seen her. "She already knows about the papers," Marlene said. Julian went still. "What papers?" Marlene did not answer. Then he noticed the trash bin beside the utility sink. On top of old packing tape and torn tissue paper sat the corner of a ripped manila envelope. His mother's name was written across it, Marlene Brooks. Beneath that, in Serena's neat handwriting, were 5 words that made the garage seem to tilt around him. Adult adoption file copy requested. Julian stared at the torn envelope as if the words might rearrange themselves into something harmless. They did not. Adult adoption file copy requested. The phrase sat there like a crack running through the foundation of his entire marriage. Behind him, Marlene shifted uneasily on the mattress. "Julian." Her voice was gentle, too gentle. He looked back at her. The woman who should have been asleep in a sunlit guest suite was sitting in a garage beside paint cans and garden tools, worried not about herself but about everyone else. "When did this happen?" he asked quietly. Marlene lowered her eyes. "A while ago." "A while ago" isn't an answer. The words came out sharper than he intended. Immediately guilt followed. Not because he had raised his voice, because she flinched. The sight made him feel sick. Julian crouched beside her again and softened his tone. "Mom, look at me." Slowly she did. "When did you start sleeping out here?" For a moment she seemed to consider lying, then something inside her gave way. "About 6 weeks." Julian closed his. 6 weeks. 42 days, 42 nights. He had spent part of that time speaking at conferences about leadership and responsibility while the woman he loved slept on concrete. The shame hit harder than the anger. "Why didn't you call me?" Marlene offered a sad smile. "You were busy." That answer hurt even more. Because it was true. The mansion door opened. Footsteps echoed through the hallway. Then Serena appeared. For half a second surprise crossed her face. Only half a second. After that, her expression settled into calm concern. "Julian." She placed a hand against her chest. "Oh my God, you're home early." As if she had just discovered an unexpected guest. Not a husband, not a crisis. Julian stood slowly. His eyes never left hers. Serena glanced toward Marlene, then toward the mattress. A tiny pause, almost invisible. Then came the performance. "Marlene, sweetheart, you shouldn't be down here. I told you your room was ready." Julian felt something cold move through him. His mother looked confused, not because of what Serena said, because of how easily she said it. Serena walked forward. Perfect hair, perfect makeup, perfect concern. The same woman photographed at charity galas and hospital fundraisers. The same woman who always knew exactly how to sound compassionate. "What happened?" she asked. "Did she have another episode?" Another episode. Julian noticed it immediately. Not what happened, not why are you in the garage. Another episode, as if there had already been many. Marlene's shoulders tightened, a small reaction, but Julian saw it. "Episode?" he repeated. Serena sighed. "I didn't want to worry you during your trip." Julian remained silent. Serena continued. "Marlene has been confused lately. Sometimes she wanders. Sometimes she insists on sleeping in strange places." Marlene looked down. Julian watched both women carefully. One seemed frightened. The other seemed prepared. That difference mattered. "I see," Julian said. Nothing more. No accusation, no confrontation, not yet. Serena visibly relaxed. She thought he believed her. That realization alone told him something was very wrong. A few minutes later, Marlene was back inside the house. Julian insisted. He carried her suitcase upstairs himself. The guest suite door stood at the end of the hall, locked. Julian noticed it immediately. He tried the handle, nothing. Serena stepped beside him. Oh, I forgot. Another tiny lie. The lock jammed last week. Julian looked at her, then at the door, then back at her. Do you have the key? Somewhere. Every answer seemed designed to float just beyond verification. Julian nodded. He said nothing. That frightened Serena more than anger would have. Later that night she hosted dinner exactly as planned. Candles, wine, polite conversation, the image of a perfect marriage. But Julian barely tasted his food. He watched, observed, listened. Serena filled every silence. She discussed charity boards, fundraising events, a luncheon with members of the Bellevue Circle. She never once mentioned the garage, not once. And Marlene barely spoke. At one point Serena reached over and adjusted the napkin in Marlene's lap. A small gesture. Anyone watching would have called it kindness. But Marlene froze, just for a second, then smiled. Julian saw that too. After dinner he claimed exhaustion from travel and went upstairs early. Instead of sleeping, he sat alone in his office. Rain tapped softly against the windows. The house was quiet. For the first time in years he opened the security app connected to the estate cameras. There were dozens, exterior coverage, entry points, driveways, common areas. Enough to monitor the property remotely. He rarely checked them. Why would he? This was home. Or at least he thought it was. He pulled footage from the previous week, then 2 weeks, then a month. The first few clips looked normal. Gardeners, deliveries, maintenance workers. Then something caught his attention. A timestamp from 18 days earlier. Marlene appeared carrying a tray toward the dining room. A moment later Serena entered the frame. No audio, only images. Serena pointed somewhere off camera. Marlene stopped, then slowly turned around. The tray remained in her hands. She walked away, alone. Julian frowned. He fast-forwarded another clip. Marlene carrying folded laundry, another. Marlene sitting alone on a patio chair while guests laughed near the pool, another. Marlene entering through the side service entrance instead of the front door. The pattern felt wrong. Not enough for proof, but enough for unease. Then something stranger happened. Several interior camera feeds suddenly vanished, one after another. Blank screens. No recordings, no history, nothing. Julian checked settings. Access logs, permissions. Someone had disabled them weeks ago, someone with administrative authority, someone inside the house. His jaws tightened. He leaned back in his chair. For years he had believed success solved problems. Buy a bigger house, hire better staff, provide comfort, write checks, fix things. But sitting there in the dark office he felt the weight of a different truth. Money had built walls. It had not built presence. The clock neared midnight. Julian rubbed his eyes. Then a soft knock came from the office door. He looked up. Marlene stood there. She wore a blue robe now. No uniform, at least not tonight. Can't sleep, she asked. Julian forced a smile. Apparently not. She stepped inside and closed the door behind her. For several seconds she simply stood there, thinking, deciding. Then she reached inside the pocket of her robe and pulled out a small brass key. Julian frowned. What's that? Marlene looked toward the hallway, toward the locked guest suite. Then back at him. I kept a spare. His heartbeat quickened. But that's not why I came. Slowly she placed something else on his desk, a folded piece of paper. Yellowed, wrinkled, hidden many times. Julian unfolded it carefully. At the top was the logo of the King County Archives Department. Below it was a reference number, and beneath that a handwritten note. Not from an official, not from Marlene, from Serena. The words were short, terrifyingly short. Do not send future copies here. He must never see these records. Julian stared at the note, then slowly lifted his eyes toward Marlene. For the first time all night, she looked directly at him, and what she said next made his blood run cold. There are more papers, Julian. She swallowed. And I think Serena has been hiding them for years. Julian did not sleep. The note remained on his desk long after Marlene left the office. Do not send future copies here. He must never see these records. The handwriting was unmistakably Serena's, not because he recognized every letter, because he had spent 15 years watching her sign checks, holiday cards, charity pledges, and anniversary notes. There was no mistake. Around 3 a.m, Julian called someone he trusted, not a friend, not a board member, his attorney. James Whitaker answered on the third ring. Everything okay? No. The single word was enough. James had represented Julian for almost a decade. He knew the difference between a business problem and a personal one. Tell me. Julian did. Not all of it, not yet, just enough. The garage, the note, the hidden records, the strange references to adoption documents. When he finished, silence filled the line. Finally, James spoke. Don't confront her. Julian leaned back in his chair. I wasn't planning to. Good. If documents are being hidden, you need facts before accusations. I know. Start preserving everything. The lawyer's voice grew firmer. Photos, copies, security logs, access records, anything you find. Julian looked toward the dark hallway. For the first time, his own house felt unfamiliar. I should have seen this. James paused. No, Julian frowned. You should have checked. That's different. The distinction hurt because it was true. After ending the call, Julian began working, not as a husband, not as a victim, as the CEO who had built companies by following evidence instead of emotions. He photographed the garage, the mattress, the uniform, the pill bottles, the locked guest suite, the suitcase hidden behind storage bins. Then he backed up every image into a secure cloud archive Serena could not access. By dawn he had created a folder simply named Marlene. The name alone made his chest tighten. At breakfast, Serena looked flawless, cream-colored sweater, diamond earrings, coffee already waiting beside Julian's seat, the picture of domestic perfection. Marlene sat quietly at the far end of the table. Her eyes seemed tired. Julian noticed something else. She never reached for food until Serena began eating first, a small thing, but not really. Good morning, Serena said brightly. Julian nodded. She studied him for a moment. You didn't sleep much, jet lag, poor thing, poor thing. The words almost made him laugh. Instead, he took a sip of coffee. Serena continued. I'm meeting the Bellevue Circle Committee later. There it was, the group. The social network she talked about constantly. Charity galas, fundraisers, elite wives, private events. Status disguised as service. Julian had never cared much about any of it, but Serena cared deeply, sometimes too deeply. As breakfast continued, he simply listened. That was when he noticed another pattern. Every time Marlene attempted to join the conversation, Serena redirected it, smoothly, effortlessly, like a traffic officer controlling a busy intersection. No one would have called it rude. Yet Marlene spoke less and less until she eventually stopped trying. The moment lingered in Julian's mind all morning. By noon he found himself standing outside the estate office. The house manager, Tessa Morgan, worked there. She was 48, efficient, respected, and fiercely private. If anyone knew what happened inside the mansion while he traveled, it would be her. Tessa looked surprised when he appeared. Mr. Harrow, do you have a minute? Her expression tightened slightly. Of course. Julian closed the office door behind him. Then he asked the question directly. Has my mother been sleeping in the garage for 6 weeks? The color drained from Tessa's face. For a moment she said nothing. That told him more than words could. Tessa. She looked down. I didn't think you knew. Julian exhaled slowly. I know enough. The house manager sat heavily in her chair. The conflict on her face was obvious. Loyalty, fear, relief, all fighting at once. Finally she spoke. Mrs. Harrow said it was temporary. Julian waited. Then she said your mother preferred the space. Neither of them believed that. Tessa. His voice softened. Please. The woman looked genuinely pained. I tried to help. Julian saw tears gathering in her eyes. I brought blankets, extra pillows. I kept telling Mrs. Harrow it wasn't right. What did Serena say? A bitter laugh escaped Tessa that it wasn't my place. Julian looked away. The answer felt predictable, and somehow that made it worse. What else? Tessa hesitated again. Longer this time. Then she leaned forward. Your mother wasn't the only person being controlled. Julian frowned. What do you mean? Mrs. Harrow monitored visitors. The words came carefully. Phone calls too. His pulse quickened. Explain. Tessa opened a drawer. Inside sat a small notebook. Not Marlene's, Tessa's. She flipped through several pages. Dates, names, short notes, professional records. I started keeping this because things felt wrong. Julian stared. The entries stretched back months. Deliveries denied. Visitors turned away. Calls redirected. Medical correspondence intercepted. Every page carried dates and details. Nothing dramatic, which made it more believable. One entry immediately caught his attention. County archives returned. Sender denied access. Julian's stomach tightened. What is this? Tessa pointed. 3 months ago. He read the note twice, then a third time. A package addressed to Marlene had arrived. Serena refused delivery. The package was returned. The sender was the King County Archives Department, the same office mentioned on the document Marlene had shown him. Julian slowly closed the notebook. His heartbeat had become noticeably louder. This was no longer about a single envelope or a single lie. There was a pattern, a deliberate effort. Someone had been making sure certain records never reached Marlene, or him. Tessa. She looked up. Why didn't you tell me? The question clearly hurt her. I almost did. She swallowed hard, several times. Julian remained silent. She continued. But every time I thought about calling, I worried I'd be wrong, or lose my job, or make things worse for your mother. He understood. Fear rarely looked dramatic. Most of the time it looked practical, human, real, and Serena apparently knew exactly how to use it. That evening Julian reviewed more security logs, not footage, access records, digital permissions, door activity, system changes. At first nothing stood out. Then he found something. 6 weeks earlier, the same week Marlene moved into the garage, the guest suite smart lock had been reprogrammed. Authorization, Serena Harrow. Julian stared at the screen. The lock had not malfunctioned. It had been changed. Intentionally, he immediately printed the report, then added it to the growing folder. As he reached for another file, a notification appeared. Security system activity. Archive folder accessed. Timestamp. 5 minutes ago. Julian froze. The folder containing all the evidence. Someone had tried opening it. Fortunately, the login attempt failed. He checked the source device. His eyes narrowed. The request had originated from Serena's laptop. Not by accident, not randomly. Specifically, she was looking for something, or trying to find out what he knew. Julian slowly closed the screen. For the first time, he realized Serena might already suspect he was investigating. Then his office phone rang. The caller ID displayed a number he didn't recognize. King County Archives, Julian answered immediately. A woman's voice greeted him. Mr. Harrow? Yes, my name is Denise Keller. I'm calling regarding a records request connected to Marlene Brooks. Julian sat forward, every nerve in his body suddenly alert. What records? There was a pause. Then Denise answered carefully. I can't disclose details over the phone without proper verification. His frustration rose. Then why call me? Another pause. When she spoke again, her tone had changed, more cautious, more concerned. Because someone contacted our office yesterday asking whether the original adoption file still existed. Julian's grip tightened. Who? We're not authorized to provide that. His jaw clenched. Then why tell me? The archivist lowered her voice. Because whoever called seemed very interested in whether certain documents had already been destroyed. Silence. Cold, heavy silence. Then she added one final sentence. And everything changed. Mr. Harrow, according to our records, the file contains materials that were sealed at the specific request of one of the parties involved. Julian's heart pounded. What materials? The archivist hesitated. I think that's something you'll need to see for yourself. Then she hung up. And for the first time, Julian began to wonder whether the hidden documents contained more than proof of Serena's cruelty. Maybe they contained a family secret that someone had spent years trying to bury. Julian spent the next morning in downtown Seattle instead of at the office. He parked 2 blocks away from King County Archives and walked the rest of the distance through cold gray drizzle. The building looked ordinary. Government buildings often did, yet somehow this one felt heavier. Inside, Denise Keller met him in a small records room lined with shelves and locked cabinets. She was in her 60s, calm and professional. After verifying his identification and reviewing the required authorization forms, she placed a thin archive box on the table. This is everything associated with the request file, she said. Julian looked at the box. He expected answers. Instead, he found more questions. The contents were surprisingly limited. Copies of legal filings, correspondence, administrative records. Nothing explosive, nothing that explained Serena's behavior. Then Denise pointed to a section marked restricted materials. These records remain sealed. Julian frowned. Why? Because one of the involved parties requested restricted access during the filing process. Can I see them? Possibly, but there are procedures. Julian leaned back. The answer frustrated him, but it also confirmed something important. Someone had wanted certain information hidden, not from the public, from specific people. On his way out, Denise stopped him. Mr. Harrow, he turned. She hesitated. Whatever you're looking for, I don't think the archive request is what started this. Julian narrowed his eyes. What do you mean? The woman chose her words carefully. People don't spend years hiding records because they're afraid of the records themselves. She paused. They're usually afraid of what those records represent. The sentence stayed with him all the way home. By afternoon, Serena was waiting in the kitchen. She stood beside the marble island scrolling through her phone, a perfect image of calm. Yet the moment she saw him, Julian noticed something new. She was watching him, not casually, carefully, measuring him. "You disappeared early," she said. "Meeting? What kind of meeting?" Julian poured himself coffee. "Work." The answer clearly annoyed her. Normally he volunteered details. Today he did not. A brief silence followed. Then Serena smiled. Too quickly. "By the way, I wanted to talk about Marlene." There it was, the topic she had been circling for days. Julian looked up. "What about her?" Serena sighed, a concerned wife's sigh. "Practiced, visured. I don't want to alarm you." His stomach tightened. Not because he believed her, because he now understood how effective she could sound. "Go ahead. I've been worried lately." Julian waited. Serena folded her arms. Her memory. The word landed exactly where he expected. Memory, small things at first. She glanced toward the hallway, misplacing items, forgetting conversations, sleeping in unusual places. Julian remained expressionless. Inside, anger slowly built. The garage had already become part of her narrative. A symptom, not a consequence, I see. Serena stepped closer. "I'm not saying anything serious is wrong." A lie wrapped inside concern. "But maybe we should think about professional support." Julian stared at her. "What kind of support?" Her answer came too quickly. Sunny Acres. The name hit him immediately. Marlene's notebook. The repeated references. The hidden concern. Sunny Acres. So this was real. Not just speculation. Serena had already chosen the destination. "I've heard good things about them," she continued. "They specialize in senior care." Julian set his coffee down. "You've researched this?" A tiny hesitation. Barely noticeable, of course. "If we're talking about someone's health, shouldn't we research?" Julian nodded slowly. The conversation ended there. But his decision had already been made. By evening, he had scheduled an appointment, not with Sunny Acres, with Dr. Alicia Mercer, a respected geriatric specialist recommended by his attorney. An independent evaluation. No involvement from Serena, no influence, no assumptions. The appointment took place 2 days later. Marlene looked nervous sitting in the examination room, not because of the doctor, because she feared becoming a problem. Julian recognized the look, the same look he had seen when she apologized for sleeping in the garage, as though existing required permission. Dr. Mercer spent nearly 2 hours with her, memory tests, reasoning exercises, medical history, conversation, observation, nothing rushed, nothing superficial. Julian waited outside, the longest 2 hours of the week. Finally, the doctor invited him back in. Marlene sat comfortably in her chair. For the first time in days, she looked slightly relieved. Dr. Mercer reviewed her notes. "Mr. Harrow, your mother shows normal age-related changes." Julian listened carefully. "No signs of dementia?" The doctor shook her head. "No clinical signs that would support that diagnosis." Julian felt a mixture of relief and rage. Relief for Marlene, rage for everything Serena had implied. Dr. Mercer continued. "She's under stress." Marlene lowered her eyes. "Significant stress." The doctor turned toward her. "Have there been changes in your living situation recently?" A long silence followed. Julian watched Marlene carefully. She could have lied, protected everyone, protected peace. Instead, she took a breath and told the truth, not all of it, but enough. "The house has felt different lately." Dr. Mercer nodded gently. "And your medications?" Marlene hesitated. Then another truth emerged. "Sometimes I couldn't find them." Julian looked at her sharply. "What?" She avoided his eyes. "I thought maybe I misplaced them." The doctor immediately took interest. "How often?" "A few times." Julian's pulse quickened. Marlene continued quietly. "Then they'd appear again." A cold feeling settled in his chest. He already knew where his mind was going, and he hated it. After the appointment, they drove home in silence. Rain streaked across the windshield. The city blurred past. Finally, Julian spoke. "Mom." Marlene looked out the window. "You don't have to protect her anymore." Her eyes closed. For a moment, she looked exhausted. "Not physically, emotionally. I wasn't protecting her. Then why didn't you tell me?" Tears gathered but never fell. "Because I kept hoping I was wrong." The answer hurt, because it sounded exactly like Tessa. Exactly like everyone who had watched small wrong things grow larger. Not from malice, from hope. Hope that tomorrow would be better. Hope that people would correct themselves. Hope that families wouldn't break. That night, Julian reviewed more records, not security footage this time. Communications, appointments, household jewels. The pattern was becoming impossible to ignore. Then another piece surfaced. A voicemail notification. Old. 3 weeks old. Never forwarded to him. The message originated from Sunny Acres. Julian listened. A woman introduced herself as an admissions coordinator. She referenced discussions with Serena. She referenced paperwork. Then came the sentence that made him sit upright. We're still waiting for documentation supporting cognitive decline before proceeding further. Julian replayed it twice, 3 times. The implication was obvious. Someone had been building a case, or trying to. His phone rang. James Whitaker. Julian answered immediately. James. The lawyer's voice sounded unusually serious. I found something. Julian stood. What? A document. His pulse jumped. What kind of document? One carrying your electronic signature. Julian went silent. James continued. It authorizes Serena to discuss placement options and care arrangements on Marlene's behalf. Julian's grip tightened around the phone. I never signed that, I know. A pause. Then the lawyer delivered the part that truly chilled him. The timestamp doesn't make sense. Julian frowned. What do you mean? James exhaled slowly. The document was supposedly signed while you were giving a live keynote presentation in Singapore. Silence filled the room, because there was only one conclusion. Someone had not merely discussed removing Marlene. Someone had begun creating paperwork to make it happen. And Julian suddenly realized just how close his mother might have come to disappearing from his life without his knowledge. Julian remained standing long after the call ended. The city lights beyond his office windows blurred into streaks of gold and white. Somewhere downstairs, Serena was probably reading in the living room or scrolling through her phone. The normal rhythm of the house continued, yet nothing felt normal anymore. Someone had used his name. Someone had forged authority he never gave, and that someone shared his last name. The next morning, James arrived at the estate before sunrise. The lawyer carried a slim leather portfolio and the expression of a man who wished he were bringing better news. Julian led him directly into the office. Show me. James opened the folder. Inside sat several printed pages. The authorization document looked legitimate at first glance. Professional formatting, correct legal language, proper electronic signature block. Even Julian's personal contact information was accurate, which made it dangerous. James pointed toward a timestamp. Here. Julian looked. Singapore. The exact date James mentioned. The exact hour Julian had been standing on a conference stage in front of hundreds of people. Can it be challenged? Yes, the answer came immediately. But challenging it isn't the problem. Julian frowned. Then what is? James leaned back. The question is why someone needed it in the first place. Silence filled the room. That question had been bothering Julian too. A forged signature wasn't an objective. It was a tool. Something bigger sat behind it. Something Serena wanted badly enough to risk being caught. James opened another file. I also pulled records connected to Sunny Acres. Julian looked up. What did you find? Nothing criminal. A pause, but enough to worry me. He slid a page across the desk. Admissions inquiry, multiple contacts, several conversations, one recurring concern, cognitive decline, behavioral instability, potential need for assisted placement. Every note traced back to Serena. Not Marlene, not a doctor, not a medical professional, Serena. Julian stared at the pages, his pulse slowed instead of quickening. That was usually a bad sign. It meant anger was becoming focus. How close was she? James understood the question immediately. Closer than I like. Julian nodded, then he made a decision. No confrontation. James looked relieved. Good. I'm not interested in arguments. Julian gathered the documents. I'm interested in facts. After James left, Julian drove to a small coffee shop near downtown Bellevue. Not because he wanted coffee, because someone else had agreed to meet him there. Tessa arrived 10 minutes later. She looked nervous, more nervous than before. Julian understood why. People like Serena rarely threatened openly. The pressure came through implications, careers, references, social circles, future opportunities. Tessa sat across from him. Thank you for coming. She managed a weak smile. I almost didn't. Julian appreciated the honesty. What changed your mind? Tessa stared into her coffee, then sighed. Your mother. The answer surprised him. Tessa continued. I saw her last winter sitting in the garage with gloves on. Julian felt his jaw tighten. It wasn't even that cold outside. Her voice cracked slightly, but it was cold in there. For a moment neither spoke. Then Tessa reached into her purse. She removed a flash drive. Small, ordinary, potentially life-changing. I shouldn't have this. Julian stared at it. What is it? Backups. His eyes narrowed. Backups of what? Tessa swallowed. The security recordings that disappeared. Everything inside Julian seemed to stop. The missing footage, the blank cameras, the erased history. You saved them? Not all of them. She slid the drive across the table. But enough. Julian looked down at it. Months of questions suddenly felt closer to answers. Tessa, she interrupted gently. I couldn't watch anymore. The words carried more weight than any evidence. Not because of what they proved, because of what they cost. That afternoon Julian reviewed the files alone, one by one, patiently, carefully. The first clips were exactly what he expected. Marlene being redirected away from family dinners, guests entering through the front entrance while Marlene quietly used a service door, trays of food, forced distance, social exclusion, painful, but not shocking anymore. Then came another video, and Julian froze. The footage showed the guest suite hallway, timestamped 7 weeks earlier. Marlene stood outside her room carrying folded laundry. She attempted to open the door. Nothing happened. She tried again, still locked. A minute later Serena appeared. The camera had no audio, but it didn't need any. Julian watched Marlene speak, watched Serena respond, watched his mother's shoulders slowly lower. Submission, embarrassment, defeat. Then Serena handed her a small key card. Not to the guest suite, to the garage side entrance. Julian had to stop the video. His hands were shaking. Not from rage, from guilt. Every detail exposed something he should have noticed. Something he should have asked, something he had missed. Hours later another clip appeared. This one hurt even more. The dining room, a small birthday cake, several candles, nothing extravagant, just simple. Homemade. The timestamp revealed the date immediately. Julian's birthday. He remembered that trip. A conference in New York, a delayed flight, a rushed phone call home. The footage showed Marlene arranging plates, adjusting decorations, waiting. Then Serena entered. The older woman smiled, clearly excited, clearly hopeful. Julian's chest tightened. He already knew what came next. Serena removed the decorations, one by one, the candles, plates, the cakes, everything. Then she carried the cake away. Out of frame. Marlene remained standing alone, motionless. The clip ended. Julian pushed back from his desk. He couldn't watch another second, not yet. As evening approached, Marlene knocked softly on his office door. Can I come in? Julian quickly minimized the videos. Of course. She stepped inside carrying 2 mugs of tea. For a few moments neither mentioned the investigation, neither mentioned Serena, neither mentioned the garage. They simply sat, mother and son. The silence felt strangely healing until Marlene spoke. Did you find more? Julian looked at her. She already knew the answer. A little. Her eyes lowered. I was hoping maybe I imagined some of it. The sentence broke something inside him, not because it was sad, because it was human. Victims often questioned themselves before questioning others, especially when the other person smiled while hurting them. Julian reached across the desk and took her hand. You didn't imagine any of it. Marlene nodded quietly. Then, after several seconds, she said something unexpected. There was a letter. Julian frowned. A letter? She looked toward the window. I never saw all of it. His pulse quickened. What kind of letter? It arrived from the county archive. Julian sat forward. The same archive? She nodded. Serena opened it before I could. His heart began beating faster. What was inside? Marlene hesitated. For the first time all evening, fear appeared again. Not fear for herself. Fear of what came next. I only saw 1 page. Julian waited. Her voice became almost a whisper. There was a photograph attached. A photograph of who? Marlene looked directly into his eyes, and what she said next changed everything. I don't know. She swallowed hard. But Serena looked at it and said, if Julian ever sees this, everything changes. Julian did not answer immediately. The office felt smaller after Marlene's words. A photograph. 1 image hidden inside a county archive package. 1 image Serena believed could change everything. The problem was obvious. Neither of them knew what the photograph showed. What else do you remember? Julian asked quietly. Marlene shook her head. Not much. She looked frustrated by her own answer. I only saw it for a second. What kind of photograph was it? I'm not sure. Her brow furrowed. I remember a man. Julian froze. A man? She nodded slowly. Adult, not young. That ruled out dozens of possibilities and created dozens more. Marlene looked away. I remember Serena's face more than the picture. What do you mean? For the first time, genuine confusion crossed her features. She looked afraid. The answer lingered between them. Afraid. Not angry, not disgusted, not embarrassed, afraid. After Marlene left, Julian remained in the office for another hour. He reviewed everything they had gathered, the forged authorization, the security footage, the missing archive records, the Sunny Acres contacts, the hidden correspondence. At first it seemed like multiple separate problems, but the more he studied them, the more they pointed toward a single conclusion. Serena had not been trying to hide one thing, she had been trying to control an entire narrative. What narrative remained unclear, but it existed. The next morning he took another step. A quiet one, a careful one. He hired someone, not a celebrity investigator, not a dramatic television-style detective, a former financial crimes analyst named Evan Rhodes, 53 years old. Methodical, patient, known for tracing information rather than chasing people. By noon, Rhodes sat across from Julian reviewing copies of the evidence. When he finished reading, he remained silent for several moments. Julian appreciated that. People who rushed toward conclusions usually missed important details. Finally, Rhodes spoke. What do you believe Serena wants? Julian thought about it. Control. Over what? My mother. Rhodes nodded. That's part of it. The answer surprised him. What do you mean? The investigator tapped a finger against the adoption records folder. People rarely go to this much effort simply because they dislike someone. Julian listened. Lock changes, intercepted correspondence, archive requests, forged authorizations, medical narratives. Rhodes leaned back. That's strategy. The word hit hard. Because Julian understood strategy. He had built an empire using it. Strategy existed to achieve objectives, not emotions. Objectives. So what's the objective? Julian asked. Rhodes met his eyes. That's what we need to find out. Later that afternoon, another piece of the puzzle arrived unexpectedly. Not from an investigator, not from a lawyer, from Serena herself. Julian entered the kitchen and found her sitting with 3 women he recognized from various charity functions, members of the Bellevue Circle, expensive clothes, perfect smiles, carefully curated lives. The conversation stopped the moment he walked in. Too quickly, much too quickly. One of the women stood. We were just leaving. Julian nodded politely. Nothing more. The women gathered their handbags and disappeared toward the front entrance. Serena remained seated, watching him, measuring him again. That had become a habit lately. As soon as the door closed, she spoke. You seem distant. Julian poured a glass of water. I've been busy. With what? He turned toward her. Work. The answer clearly irritated her, again. You know, Serena said carefully, people have started noticing changes. Julian frowned. What changes? She hesitated. The way your mother behaves. There it was again. Always back to Marlene, always planting seeds. Always suggesting concern. Julian set the glass down, harder than intended. The sound echoed through the kitchen. For the first time, Serena looked slightly uncertain. Not afraid, just uncertain enough. The word came out calm, very calm, which made it stronger. What? Stop. Silence. Julian stepped closer. If you have medical concerns, they go through doctors. Her expression shifted. Barely, but no, he cut her off. Not rumors. Another silence. Longer this time. Something had changed, a boundary, small but real, and Serena felt it. He could see it in her eyes. That evening, Marlene surprised him. She knocked on his office door carrying a cardboard box. I found this. Julian looked up. What is it? It was in storage. The box appeared old. Very old. Dust coated the edges. A faded shipping label clung to one side. Julian opened it carefully. Inside sat years of documents, tax papers, insurance forms, medical receipts, nothing unusual. Then he found something interesting, a manila folder, King County Adult Adoption Court. His heartbeat quickened. Marlene, she nodded. I forgot I kept copies. Julian opened the folder, not the sealed records, not the missing documents, just standard court materials. Yet something inside immediately caught his attention. A witness statement. He began reading. Then stopped. Read it again. The signature at the bottom belonged to Marlene. The date matched the adoption process. But that wasn't what mattered. One paragraph stood out. The statement explained why Marlene wanted the adult adoption finalized. Julian expected legal language. Instead, he found something deeply personal. She had written that family was not determined by blood, race, or history. Family was the person who stayed, the person who chose responsibility, the person who remained when remaining became difficult. Julian stared at the words. His vision blurred slightly, not because the statement revealed a secret, because it revealed a sacrifice, the kind nobody talks about, the kind that becomes invisible over time. For years he had focused on outcomes, success, security, comfort, money. Meanwhile, Marlene had been protecting something far simpler, belonging. A soft knock interrupted the moment. Tessa stood in the doorway. She looked nervous, again, which immediately concerned him. What happened? Tessa stepped inside and closed the door. I wasn't sure whether to tell you. Julian stood. Tell me what? She handed him her phone. An image filled the screen, a screenshot, apparently taken by accident. Or maybe secretly, Julian couldn't tell. At first glance it appeared harmless. An email, nothing more. Then he saw the sender, Bellevue Circle Executive Committee. His eyes narrowed. What is this? Tessa swallowed. I found it while printing seating charts. Julian kept reading. The message discussed an upcoming charity gala, guest lists, donors, sponsors. Then one sentence made his stomach tighten. Special recognition ceremony regarding family caregiving initiative. Mrs. Serena Harrow will share her experience caring for an elderly dependent family member facing cognitive decline. Julian looked up slowly. What is this? Tessa's voice dropped almost to a whisper. I think she's preparing something. A chill ran through him, because he suddenly understood. Sunny Acres, the forged paperwork, the dementia narrative, the charity circles, the public concern. It wasn't just about removing Marlene anymore. Serena was building credibility, creating witnesses, creating a story she could eventually point to and say, see? Everyone knew. Julian stared at the email, then at the event date, 3 weeks away, and for the first time he realized Serena wasn't reacting to circumstances. She was following a plan that had already moved much farther than anyone realized, and somewhere inside that plan was a photograph she had been desperate to hide. Julian barely slept. The image of that email remained in his mind long after midnight. Special recognition ceremony, family caregiving initiative, elderly dependent family member facing cognitive decline. Every word had been chosen carefully, not because it was true, because it sounded true. And once enough people repeated a story, truth became harder to separate from reputation. The next morning, Evan Rhodes called. I found something. Julian immediately closed his laptop. What is it? The archive package. His pulse quickened. Rhodes spoke slowly. The package wasn't requested once, a pause. It was requested 4 times. Julian stood. 4? Over 18 months, the investigator emailed several documents while speaking. Julian opened them immediately. Request logs, dates, tracking numbers, correspondence. The pattern was impossible to miss. The first request had been legitimate, filed by Marlene. The second had been cancelled. The third had been redirected. The fourth had disappeared entirely. Each interruption occurred after Serena gained access to the household mail and administrative accounts. Julian stared at the timeline. This had not started 6 weeks ago or 6 months ago. It stretched much further back. Someone was monitoring those records, Rhodes said. Yes, not just monitoring. Another pause. Controlling. Julian rubbed his forehead. Every answer uncovered a deeper layer, and every deeper layer pointed toward planning, not impulse. Planning. After ending the call, he found Marlene in the sunroom. She sat beside a window overlooking the lake. A book rested open in her lap, though she clearly wasn't reading. Her mind seemed somewhere else. Julian sat beside her. For a few moments neither spoke. The silence felt familiar, comfortable. Then he asked quietly, did Serena ever ask you about the adoption? Marlene's fingers tightened around the book. Several times, Julian looked at her. What exactly did she ask? Marlene stared out at the water. Whether I regretted it. The answer surprised him. Regretted what? Making it legal. Julian frowned. Marlene finally turned toward him. She never understood why it mattered. A faint sadness crossed her face. To her, family was something people inherited. Julian listened. To me, family was something people earned. The words settled heavily between them, not because they were dramatic, because they were true. Marlene closed the book. At first she was curious, her voice softened, then she became irritated. Julian felt his stomach tighten. What changed? Marlene looked away. I think she realized nothing would ever replace me. The answer hurt more than he expected, not because of what it revealed about Serena, because of what it revealed about Marlene. She had understood the problem long before anyone else, and she had carried it alone. That afternoon, Julian made another decision. No more assumptions, no more waiting. He drove directly to Sunny Acres. The facility sat outside Bellevue on landscape grounds that looked more like a private resort than a care center. Fresh paint, flower gardens, comfortable buildings, nothing about it seemed sinister, which was exactly why it worked. The admissions director, Linda Patterson, agreed to meet him after James provided proper authorization documents. The woman appeared professional and cautious. Julian respected that. He explained his concerns. She listened carefully, then she reviewed internal records. For nearly 20 minutes she said nothing. Finally she looked up. "Mr. Harrow, I need to be very careful here." Julian nodded. "I understand." She folded her hands. "Your wife contacted us multiple times, no surprise there." But then Linda continued. Initially she requested information. Julian waited. Later she requested assessments. His pulse increased. Assessments? Not formal evaluations. Linda chose each word carefully. "But she repeatedly described your mother as increasingly confused, vulnerable, and potentially incapable of managing daily decisions." Julian stared at her. The description sounded nothing like Marlene. Not the woman reading books by the lake. Not the woman who remembered every birthday and every anniversary. Not the woman who had survived decades of difficult work with dignity. Did anyone here ever evaluate her? Linda shook her head. No. Relief mixed with anger. Then came the next revelation. "We informed Mrs. Harrow that no placement decision could occur without appropriate medical evidence." Julian already knew that. The voicemail had confirmed it. But Linda wasn't finished. After that conversation, communication became more aggressive. Julian frowned. "What does that mean?" The admissions director opened a file, then slid one page across the desk. His heartbeat stopped. The document was familiar, too familiar, the forged authorization. Only this version contained handwritten notes. Serena's notes. Julian recognized the handwriting immediately. Several sentences were underlined. One phrase circled repeatedly, emergency guardianship consideration. He looked up slowly. Linda's expression remained professional, but concern lingered behind it. "Mr. Harrow, this facility declined involvement." Julian remained silent. The implications were obvious. If Sunny Acres refused cooperation, Serena would eventually need another path, another institution, another doctor, another narrative, something. Because people who invested this much effort rarely walked away. When Julian returned home, darkness had already settled across the property. The mansion lights glowed warmly against the evening sky. For the first time he saw the house the way Marlene probably saw it. Beautiful, lonely, full of closed doors. Inside, Serena was preparing for an upcoming charity event. Guest lists covered the dining table, place cards, seating charts, donation packages. Everything looked meticulously organized. She glanced up as he entered. "You were out all day." Julian removed his coat. "Yes, business? Something like that." The answer clearly irritated her again. Serena studied him carefully. Then something unexpected happened. She smiled. Not warmly, not affectionately, almost knowingly. "You've been spending a lot of time with Marlene lately." The sentence sounded innocent. It wasn't. Julian recognized the test immediately. "So?" Serena shrugged. "No reason." Another lie. He walked away before she could continue. That night, Evan Rhodes called again. This time his voice sounded different, more serious. "I located the photograph." Julian sat upright. "What?" "The one from the archive package." His heart began pounding. "How?" "One of the archive employees made a preservation copy before the package disappeared." For several seconds, Julian couldn't speak. After weeks of questions, the photograph was real. It existed. "What does it show?" Silence, long enough to make Julian uneasy. Finally, Rhodes answered. "That's the problem." Julian gripped the phone tighter. "What problem?" Another pause. Then the investigator exhaled slowly. "Mr. Harrow, before I send it, I think you should prepare yourself." Every nerve in Julian's body tightened. "Why?" The answer came quietly. "Because the man in that photograph isn't a stranger." Julian's heart slammed against his ribs. Rhodes continued. "And if I'm right, this picture may explain exactly why Serena was terrified of those records." Then the line went silent. Julian ended the call and sat motionless in the darkness. The photograph had existed for months, maybe longer. Serena had intercepted it, hidden it, protected herself from it. And now Rhodes was telling him the man in the image was someone he already knew. His phone vibrated, a secure message arrived, one attachment, no explanation, no additional text, just the photograph. Julian opened it. For several seconds, he didn't understand what he was seeing. The image was old but clear, a courthouse hallway. Several adults standing together after what appeared to be a legal proceeding. Marlene stood near the center, younger, smiling. Beside her stood a judge, an attorney, and another man. Julian zoomed in. His breath caught. The man wasn't a stranger. It was Robert Harrow, his late father-in-law, Serena's father. Julian stared at the image again and again. The date stamp sat at the bottom. 12 years earlier, the same year the adult adoption had been finalized. What the hell? The words escaped before he realized he had spoken. Robert Harrow had attended the adoption hearing. Not casually, not accidentally. He appeared directly beside Marlene in every frame. One arm rested lightly behind her, protective, familiar, comfortable. Julian immediately called Rhodes. The investigator answered on the first ring. You saw it. Why was Robert there? That's what I asked myself. Julian stood and paced across the office. Did you find anything else? Some. The answer came carefully, not enough to draw conclusions. Julian hated that answer, because it was responsible, and responsibility rarely gave immediate relief. What do we know? Rhodes found a file. We know Robert attended the hearing. Yes. We know he signed the witness log. Julian stopped walking. What? He signed as a supporting witness. Julian's mind raced. That made no sense. Robert had never mentioned it. Not once. Not during family dinners. Not during holidays. Not during business discussions. Never. Keep digging, Julian said. I'm already doing that. After the call ended, Julian remained in the office for nearly an hour. One question kept returning. Why would Serena panic over a photograph connecting her father to Marlene? The image itself wasn't scandalous. Nothing inappropriate, nothing criminal, just a photograph, unless the photograph proved something else, something Serena already understood. The following afternoon, Julian visited Robert's former attorney. The older man, Walter Gaines, had retired years earlier, but still maintained a small consulting office. After verifying Julian's identity, he agreed to a brief meeting. The attorney listened carefully, then removed his glasses. I wondered if someone would eventually ask about that. Julian's pulse quickened. You remember it? Walter nodded. Of course, then tell me. The attorney hesitated, not from fear, from professional caution. Robert cared deeply about Marlene. Julian frowned. What does that mean? It means exactly what I said. Walter folded his hands. He respected her. Julian waited. Why? The older man smiled faintly. Because she saved him. The room fell silent. Julian blinked. What? Walter nodded. Years ago. Saved him from what? The attorney shook his head. I can't discuss private matters belonging to a deceased client. Frustration surged through Julian. But you just said I said enough. Walter stood. The meeting was over, but before Julian could leave, the attorney added one final sentence. Robert believed Marlene possessed more integrity than most wealthy people he ever met. Then he walked away. The statement haunted Julian all the way home, because it sounded exactly like something Robert would say. The old businessman had always valued character over appearances, one of the few things Julian genuinely admired about him. Yet, Serena had spent years treating Marlene like an embarrassment. Something didn't fit. That evening another surprise arrived. James called. His tone sounded urgent. Check your email. Julian opened his inbox immediately. Several scanned pages had arrived from the estate attorney handling Robert Harrow's old records. Julian read quickly, then slower, then a third time, because what he found made no sense. Several years before his death, Robert had amended portions of his estate planning documents. Nothing dramatic, nothing public. But one clause stood out, a private letter of recommendation addressed to future trustees of a charitable foundation. One paragraph mentioned Marlene by name, not as staff, not as an acquaintance, as family. Julian leaned back. The words seemed almost impossible. Family. Robert Harrow had called Marlene family, long before Serena began trying to erase her, long before the garage, long before the forged documents. Julian immediately drove downstairs. Marlene sat in the kitchen drinking tea. The familiar sight almost broke his heart. Months ago she had been eating alone in a garage. Now she sat under warm lights. Yet the damage remained. He placed the document on the table. Marlene, she looked up, then saw the name, Robert Harrow. The color drained from her face. Julian noticed immediately. You knew, her silence answered before words could. Marlene, she looked down at the paper, slowly, carefully, like someone opening a door she had spent years avoiding. I didn't think those records still existed. Julian sat across from her. What records? For a long moment she said nothing. Then she whispered, Robert asked me not to tell anyone. The statement hit like a hammer. Not tell anyone what? Julian felt his heart pounding. Marlene, what aren't you telling me? Pain filled her eyes, not fear, pain, the kind created by carrying something too long. She looked toward the window. The lake beyond had disappeared into darkness. Serena always thought I was hiding something from her. Her voice trembled slightly. The truth is, she stopped. Julian waited. Every second felt endless. The truth is she was right. Silence, heavy, unavoidable. Julian's stomach tightened. What truth? Marlene closed her eyes, just briefly. When she opened them again, tears had appeared. Not dramatic tears, old tears, tired tears, the kind that came from decades of protecting someone else's secret. I never wanted this to reach you this way. Julian barely breathed. Marlene, she looked directly at him, and for the first time since the nightmare began, he saw genuine fear in her face. Not fear of Serena, not fear of exposure, fear of losing him. Then she spoke. Before he died, Robert Harrow told me something about your family. Julian froze. His family, not Serena's, his. And suddenly the photograph, the adoption records, the missing letters, the hidden archive files, and Serena's desperation all seemed connected to a truth far bigger than elder abuse. A truth someone had been hiding for years. A truth Marlene was finally preparing to reveal. Marlene sat quietly for a long time after her confession. Julian did not rush her. For the first time since finding her in the garage, he understood that some wounds were older than Serena. Some secrets had been buried long before cruelty entered the house. Finally, Marlene spoke. Robert knew about the adoption before almost anyone else. Her voice was steady now. He helped me find the attorney. Julian stared at her. Why? Because he believed family should be protected. She smiled sadly, even when other people didn't understand it. The pieces slowly came together. Robert Harrow had never viewed Marlene as staff, never viewed her as an outsider. He had respected her, defended her, and when Serena began trying to erase her place in the family, she had hidden every document that proved otherwise. Not because the papers exposed a scandal, because they exposed the truth. Marlene belonged. The adoption file, the witness statement, the archive records, the photograph. Every piece said the same thing: family. Serena had spent years fighting a battle she could never truly win. Not against Marlene, against reality itself. The charity dinner took place 2 weeks later. It did not become the public spectacle Serena had imagined. By then, too many facts existed. Too many documents. Too many witnesses. Tessa provided a formal statement. The physician who evaluated Marlene confirmed she showed no signs of cognitive impairment. The questioned authorization was referred for legal review. James filed the divorce petition. Not dramatically, not publicly, just professionally. Exactly the way real consequences usually arrived. One document at a time, one decision at a time, one door quietly closing after another. Serena tried to defend herself. At first she blamed misunderstandings, then stress, then social pressure, then fear. Some people believed parts of her explanation, others did not. But nobody could explain away the garage mattress. Nobody could explain away the locked bedroom. Nobody could explain away the intercepted letters. And nobody could explain why a woman who claimed to care about an elderly family member had spent so much energy trying to remove her. The Bellevue circle slowly distanced itself. Not overnight, not dramatically. Lunch invitations stopped arriving. Committee positions disappeared. Phone calls went unanswered. The loss happened the same way trust usually disappeared, gradually, one disappointment at a time. Julian felt no satisfaction watching it happen, only exhaustion. The goal had never been revenge, it had been protection. There was a difference. 3 months later, the divorce process continued through attorneys. The legal review remained ongoing. The foundation board removed Serena from all planning authority. Life moved forward, not perfectly, but honestly. One Saturday morning, construction crews finished the final details of a project on the estate. The garage no longer looked like a place where someone had been hidden. The cold concrete space had been transformed into a bright studio. Large windows, bookshelves, comfortable chairs, a writing desk facing the lake. Marlene walked through the room slowly, her fingertips brushed across the shelves, across the polished wood, across the framed photographs, not photographs of wealth, not awards, not business success, family photographs, adult milestones, shared dinners, ordinary moments, the things that actually mattered. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Julian stood beside her. "It belongs to you," Marlene smiled, then surprised him. "No." Julian frowned. "What do you mean?" She looked around the room once more. "It belongs to everyone who needs it." The answer sounded exactly like her. Within months, the space became the headquarters for a new initiative, an elder dignity fund supporting low-income seniors and adult caregivers throughout Washington. Legal guidance, housing support, transportation assistance, emergency grants, practical help. Nothing flashy, just help. The kind Marlene always believed mattered most. Her name appeared on the foundation plaque. Not because she asked for it, because Julian insisted. For years she had carried responsibility without recognition. That chapter was over. Yet the most important moment came much later, on an ordinary evening, no attorneys, no investigators, no court filings, no witnesses, just a kitchen, a kettle, and two people sitting across from each other. Julian carefully poured Earl Grey tea into 2 cups, then added honey to one exactly the way Marlene preferred. The familiar scent filled the room. For a few moments neither spoke. Outside, rain tapped softly against the windows. Inside, everything felt quieter than it had in years. Julian stared into his cup, then finally said the words he should have spoken long ago. "I'm sorry." Marlene looked at him gently, not surprised, not angry, just listening. Julian swallowed hard. "I thought providing was enough." His voice cracked slightly. "I thought the house, the money, the comfort, I thought those things meant I was taking care of you." Silence lingered, painful, necessary. "But I wasn't paying attention." His eyes lifted. "When you needed me most, I wasn't there." For a moment neither moved. Then Marlene reached across the table and rested her hand over his. The same steady hand that had carried him through countless storms. "You came back." The words were simple, yet they carried more weight than forgiveness. More weight than blame. Julian shook his head. "Too late." "No." Marlene squeezed his hand gently. Late would have been never. Tears filled his eyes. Not because the hurt disappeared, it hadn't. Some damage remained, some trust needed time, some memories would always ache. But healing had finally begun, not because the truth erased the past, because the truth allowed them to stop hiding from it. The garage was empty now. The locked doors were gone, the hidden papers had been found, and the woman who had once been forced to sleep beside paint cans sat where she had always belonged, at the center of the family. As the evening grew darker, Julian and Marlene remained at the kitchen table, talking about ordinary things, the future, books, travel, the foundation, life, and for the first time in a very long time, neither of them felt alone. If this story moved you, share your thoughts in the comments. And remember, sometimes the people we love most don't need more gifts, they need us to show up before it's too late.